All right, folks, buckle up because we're about to dive into a hypothetical scenario so wild it would make even the most imaginative conspiracy theorist blush. Imagine a world where the United States, in a move of unprecedented audacity, decides to annex, wait for it, Canada, Greenland, and the Panama Canal. Now, before you Canadians start throwing maple syrup at your screens and Greenlanders unleash their polar bear army, let me be clear, this is purely hypothetical. We're just messing around, exploring the what-ifs for intellectual kicks. But just imagine the seismic shift in global dynamics, the economic implications, the international outrage. It's enough to make your head spin faster than a Bieber concert in Toronto. So let's break down this gargantuan geopolitical fantasy, shall we? We'll explore the potential benefits, the inevitable drawbacks, and everything in between, because sometimes it's fun to poke the bear, even if it's a hypothetical one holding the entire North American continent in its paws. Let's face it, one of the first things that might tempt Uncle Sam in this outlandish scenario is the sheer abundance of resources up north. Canada, with its vast expanse, is like a treasure chest overflowing with goodies. We're talking oil reserves that would make even the Saudis jealous, enough timber to build a treehouse spanning the Arctic Circle, and more fresh water than you could shake a hockey stick at. And then there's Greenland, a land of icy mountains and untapped potential. Beneath its frozen surface lies a wealth of minerals, including those rare earth elements everyone's clamoring for, the stuff that powers our smartphones, electric cars, and all those other technological marvels we can't live without. So, from a purely economic standpoint, annexing Canada and Greenland starts to look like a pretty sweet deal for the US. It's like inheriting a giant, resource-rich backyard. Of course, we haven't even factored in the potential headaches of actually getting our hands on those resources, but hey, we're in fantasy land for now. Now let's shift our gaze southward to that engineering marvel connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, the Panama Canal. This strategic waterway is the lifeblood of global trade, a maritime shortcut that saves ships tons of time and money. If the US were to annex the canal, it would essentially be like owning the toll booth to one of the busiest shipping routes on the planet. Talk about a power move. They could control the flow of goods, slap on tariffs, and generally flex their maritime muscle whenever they pleased. Of course, this would likely make some countries very, very unhappy. Imagine the outrage from China, the EU, and pretty much every other nation that relies on the canal for trade. It would be a diplomatic nightmare, but hey, we're just playing pretend here, right? With climate change melting Arctic ice at an alarming rate, the race is on to control new shipping routes and exploit the region's resources. And guess who would have a head start in this frosty free-for-all if they gobbled up Canada and Greenland? Yep, the US of A. Suddenly, America's northern border wouldn't look so much like a friendly line on a map, and more like a strategic launching pad for Arctic domination. They'd have prime real estate to build military bases, monitor Russian activity, and generally become the cool kids on the Arctic bloc. Plus, let's not forget the symbolic victory of finally achieving true C2 shining sea status. From the Atlantic to the Pacific, and now the Arctic Ocean too, it would be enough to make any red-blooded American puff out their chest with pride. Section 5. More hands on deck. The population and workforce boost. Let's be real, folks, even the good old US of A has its problems. One of them is a gradually aging population, which can put a strain on things like social security and healthcare. But hey, guess what Canada has? That's right, a whole bunch of young, healthy Canadians. Add in the folks from Greenland and suddenly you've got a fresh injection of youth and vitality into the American workforce. Think of all the new taxpayers, entrepreneurs, and innovators. It would be like a shot of maple syrup-infused adrenaline straight into the heart of the American economy. Of course, convincing Canadians to trade in their universal healthcare and love of poutine might be a tough sell, but hey, stranger things have happened, right? Section 6. The world pushes back international condemnation and consequences. Okay, now it's time to address the elephant in the room, or rather the giant angry polar bear in the room, because let's be honest, the international community wouldn't exactly be throwing a ticker tape parade if the US decided to annex Canada, Greenland, and the Panama Canal. We're talking about a level of global outrage that would make the Cuban Missile Crisis look like a friendly game of checkers. Think furious UN Security Council meetings, crippling economic sanctions, and maybe even some good old-fashioned military posturing. After all, you can't just redraw the world map without expecting some pushback. The US might suddenly find itself labeled as a rogue state, a modern-day empire bent on expansion. Not exactly the best look for a country that prides itself on democracy and freedom, huh? Section 7. The price of expansion, economic costs and domestic discord. Okay, let's talk Turkey, or should I say loonies and krona. Because annexing 3 entire countries, or well, 2.5 depending on how you classify Greenland, wouldn't be cheap. We're talking about integrating different economies, currencies, legal systems. It would be a logistical nightmare. Then there's the whole issue of governing such a massive and diverse territory. How do you appease the French-speaking Canadians in Quebec? How do you address the unique needs of Greenland's Inuit population? It wouldn't be a simple matter of planting an American flag and calling it a day. And let's not forget the potential for domestic unrest. Americans themselves might not be too keen on this whole annexation business. Protests, political gridlock, maybe even some secessionist movements. It's not hard to imagine the chaos that could unfold. Section 8. Echoes of history, past annexations and today's realities. Now, some of you history buffs out there might be thinking, hold on, didn't the US annex plenty of territory back in the day? Texas, Hawaii, what's the big deal? And you'd be right, they did. But times have changed, my friends. We live in a world governed by international law where concepts like sovereignty and self-determination actually mean something, well, at least in theory. The days of just waltzing into a country and claiming it as your own are long gone. Plus, the geopolitical landscape is a lot more complex than it used to be. Back in the day, the US didn't have to worry about superpowers like China and Russia breathing down its neck. Any attempt at annexation today would be met with swift and decisive action from global players looking to protect their own interests. Section 9. A balancing act weighing the benefits and risks of a supersized America. So there you have it, folks, a whirlwind tour of the potential ups and downs of the US annexing Canada, Greenland, and the Panama Canal. On the one hand, you've got economic riches, strategic dominance, and a whole lot of new friends, or at least new passport holders. On the other hand, you've got international condemnation, economic turmoil, and the very real possibility of sparking World War III. Not exactly a simple cost-benefit analysis, is it? Ultimately, the question of whether such a move would be a good idea is a complex one, fraught with ethical, political, and strategic considerations. But hey, that's the beauty of hypothetical scenarios. We can explore them without actually having to deal with the messy consequences.